Hey guys, I'm very excited for this video. Sorry for screaming in your ear. So essentially yesterday I was talking about how important it is for you, after you've done a take-home project, to have unit tests in that take-home project. I discussed how I've lost jobs. I've discussed by not having it, I've lost an opportunity to work. By having it, I've impressed my interviewer. I once worked at a company where they didn't even do unit tests, and they were still impressed and took me as a more serious candidate because I did the take-home test. So, what I'm going to do is show you a very simple example using React and Jest on how to do unit tests. So, quickly, what the application is actually. It's an incrementer, and you can decrement, so essentially it's just a counter. So before, I said one of the best frameworks to learn is Angular, but I'm using React in this video. So I can make a video on Angular. If you guys also put in the comments if you want to see a video on Angular, I can. And the reason I said Angular is better to learn than React is because there is a scarcity in the market for Angular developers because not a lot of people want to do it. But whatever you learn here, you can apply to Angular. And like I said, I can make a video on how to unit test inside Angular. The next thing that I'm using is the Jest testing framework. The Jest testing framework is not the only test framework. However, it is the most popular framework. In every company I've worked for, we have used the Jest testing framework. In the Angular companies I've worked for, so if you don't know, Angular actually prefers Jasmine. Every company I've worked for has deleted their Jasmine tests in favor of Jest tests. And even the Angular team has come out and said that straight out of the box, they're going to let you install Jest instead of Jasmine. So Jest is very, very, very popular. Now, if I teach you something in Jest, you can also apply it to the other testing frameworks. You don't have to worry. With that being said, let's get right into it and learn how to unit test. So I'm going to give you a bit of a professional tip. Sorry, I was supposed to add this myself, but what you want to do is, did I accidentally? Yeah, I did accidentally. So what you want to do is essentially add. So here is the actual component that we created. Right now I'm using the app component, and essentially what you want to do is add a data test ID. But before I get into all of that, let me get you into the mindset or the philosophy, because programming is a lot of philosophy, right? What is the mindset when we do unit tests? So when we do unit tests, we want to test functionality. We want to test a scientific outcome. This is where we get the most value from our unit tests. So, for example, some of the best unit tests I've ever written were to do with user validation error messages. So I had a component, essentially when a user would try to put in a bad email or something like that, it would give them a specific messages. These had to be catered because of the customers that we had. Essentially, we needed to tell them exactly why their email was wrong. It was a lot of the validation stuff we had was unacceptable because it wouldn't tell you the exact reason. The reason why these unit tests were so great and brought a lot of value to the company is because there was an outcome we can test. There was a scientific outcome that we can test, right? And that's the key I want to get to you, right? You want to be able to test a scientific outcome. It has to be a small unit, and very importantly, you don't want to be testing multiple different components at the same time. Each test is its own unit, and also that is a criticism of unit tests, because when it comes to a big scale application, there's a lot of moving parts, and when you just have one unit test, what this will do is that you're not going to be able to test a huge part of the application. The way we do that is end-to-end test. I could also make a video on how we can do end-to-end tests, but let me get straight into it. Something that is very professional and will make you look like a very professional person when you give back that take-home project is if you add a data test ID. And I know it doesn't really seem like much, but it does make you professional. So what is a data test ID? I will talk about that more as we go along. Essentially, when we run our unit tests, we want to access the elements. And now we can't access the elements. We want to access each element. And adding a data test ID makes this much easier. So I'm going to call this increment, and I'm going to call this one decrement. Alright, so let's get straight into the unit testing. So I've already imported React, I've already imported render and fire events, and I've imported the component that we're going to test. So essentially when we get into unit testing, we need to focus on what are the outcomes. So I'm going to quickly open the application again, and I'm going to ask you, I've already written them down, but anyways, I'm going to ask you what are the outcomes that we want to see, right? Obviously, we want to test of this increment. This is a scientific outcome that we can test. We want to then test if it decrements. That's another scientific outcome that we can test. But one scientific outcome that you guys might have missed is that we want to test if the component actually renders correctly, and then upon rendering correctly, does it display the number 0? Because that's an essential part of the counter. The counter needs to start as 0. So let's go straight into it. So the first thing I want to do is just write test. So test is something that we're importing from Jest, right? So that's where we're getting it from. We're not getting it from thin air. Jest, we're using Jest, and then it's importing test, and then my IDE is very helpful. It's telling me what to write in next. So the next thing it wants me to do is write a string. This is important. This is important for your future job, for your future employer who's going to be looking at you. You want this string to be very descriptive, right? We want to work with programmers that are descriptive, that explain. So I was working in a code base where the tests weren't descriptive, and when a test broke or something broke, I wasn't entirely sure how to fix it because there was no description of what we were actually testing, so it made it very hard. And I'll be completely honest with you, right? The most important thing about becoming a software developer is communication, and this is a part of communication. If you cannot communicate, it will be very difficult for you to progress in your career. So let's get started. So in the description, the first test I'm going to do is, does the component render? So does it well, not that does the component render, I think that's a bit of a pointless test, but does the counter appear in the DOM? Okay, and then so this is going to be the test. The counter appears on the page. Okay, and also, right, so I'm being descriptive here. Also, the initial value will start at 0. Oops, spelled 0 and initial wrong. Is it gonna correct? Yay, okay, corrects. So the initial start value starts at 0. Again, my IDE is going to be very helpful. It's telling me to create a callback function. So the callback function is essentially what the test is going to be. Let's go straight into it. So the first part of it, oh, sorry, let me just bring up my notes a little bit. Okay, so the first part of it is going to be, we're going to import, or sorry, not import, we're going to use a function called get test ID. So I did say I'd talk more about the test ID. Get test, did I spell it wrong? No, I did spell it wrong. Get by test, get by test ID. ID is lowercase, okay. And then essentially this will be equal to render, and then what we need, and then what we're rendering is, yep, there we go. Oops. So yeah, okay, so what is get test ID? Essentially it's a function that allows us to automatically get the test ID. If you remember, I put 3 test IDs, so I put 3 of them, right? So essentially it just allows me to get this element straight away, and that's why you look more professional, right? Because if you mess around with the HTML and you're trying to get the class name, well, why don't we get the class name? Because I could have multiple, well, if we understand what class names are, we can have multiple buttons with the same class name. If we understand how divs, if we understand how IDs work and how they change, it is superior to use a data test ID, and this is essentially an industry standard. So it will make you look more professional if you're using data test ID. So I'm using that to get, and now what I want to do is identify exactly what is it I want to get. So the component that I want to get exactly, sorry, not the component, the part I want to get is I want to get essentially this, the 0, right? I want to see if it exists, or actually what might be better, actually, now that I think about it, we could do a data test, and then we'll do another data test, and we could just say that this is app. So I want to see if the component, the actual app, exists. So if I go back, and now what I would want to do is create a const, and then what I will try to do is say, we'll call this const app, and what it is equal, and I'm going to use get data test, like I said, very important, makes it much easier. And then the string I'm going to pass on to it is app, the string that we just put in. And then once that is done, I am going to check. The next thing I want to do is just, oh, actually, yeah, I'll explain this a bit more. So I have created everything, right? I have done the setup, so just, rendering the app, so rendering the actual application, that's the setup. I have done a little bit of a declaration, so I've seen what exactly I want to test, and now I am gonna do the assertion, or the actual testing part. So we have app, and essentially I want to expect app dot to be, and look, we have a lot of options, to be empty, to be falsy, to be truthy. Right now I am going to go for it to be in document, so to say, hey, I've rendered the app, I've rendered my component. Upon rendering my component, does this thing exist in the document, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press run and see if it exists in the document. And yes, it does exist in the document. So I've proven that the container, I've proven that the counter exists, right? And this is a very important aspect, and actually I'll give you a bit of a background why we actually test code in the first place. We test code to give businesses assurances that our code works, and that when our code fails, they can quickly identify where the issue is and how to fix it. So if a business ran this unit test, they could quickly see, all right, for some reason the app isn't showing. What did we recently change around the app? It makes things much quicker when we need to debug. So I'm not done there, because I said I wanted to see if the initial value was at 0. So what I could do now that I've done that, we will call it counter value, and then what we will do, it's counter value element. So we're grabbing the element, and then what we'll do is grab counter. So this isn't coming out of nowhere. It was here. This is the counter. We're grabbing the counter. We are going to grab the counter, and then we're going to do another expect. So we can do an expect to be in document, but yeah, it should be like that. But what I'm also going to do is going to have an expect, and then this will be to contain, to have value, to have text content. And then it's asking me what is the text content that it's gonna have. It should be 0. We're going to quickly just verify that that's the case. Okay, so there we go. All my tests have passed so far. This was just the one test. So I have now verified that the document, so I've now verified that the app exists, and I've also verified that it starts as 0. Okay, so let's go on to doing test 2 and then test 3. And tests 2 and 3 are going to be very similar. We might end up copying and pasting code. So I am going to just speed this up a bit and copy and paste a bit of the code. We are going to need this part, and this is the thing about tests. They're very copy and pasted. We're not going to need to test if it exists anymore. We're going to have to change this. Very important. We need to change, right? And we need to make it descriptive. When increment is pressed, then the counter value increases. Okay, so this time we want to grab what we're going to want to grab is increment instead. We've grabbed increment, and now upon grabbing increment, what we want to do is have a bit more setup. So a bit more in our declaration. So the way we do this is that we are going to use something that we imported up here, which was fire event, right? And then we need to change the name of this. Actually, we need to change it to increment element. We're gonna fire event. So essentially what we want to do with fire event is that we want to simulate a click on the page. So this allows us to simulate our user clicking something on the page. So what we want them to click is the increment element. So he clicks that, and then upon the user clicking the increment element, we are going to want to see what happens to the page, right? So we start at 0. We already know that. Okay, so upon the user clicking the increment, we are going to need a count. We are going to need the counter. So upon the user clicking the increment page, it should go to 1. right, we should expect it to go to 1. So if we do that and press play and run this, it should work. And it does work, right? We can get a bit more fancy here. We can add another click, and we can click again. This time we should expect it to go to 2. And the key thing that I'm trying to get across here. Sorry, one key thing is it's the so why it goes to 1 and 2 is because it starts at 0. But yeah, essentially we just press play again and it should work. And then the final test is just going to be a home run. Yep, the final test is going to be a bit of a home run because we've done all the work for increment. What's the difference between increment and decrement? Well, it's one adds and one minuses. So let's go. So it's complaining not to have the same name. Never have the same name. It could cause a lot of coding issues. Decrement. And when the button is pressed, we're just going to do a little copying and pasting. We're going to do this. Instead, we're going to call this the decrement element. So when this button is clicked, we are going to expect it to be -1 and then -2. Okay, so we're going to save this, run this, and hopefully it is correct. Oh, increment. Oh, I made a mistake. Increment is not defined. That's fair. So be careful when copying and pasting for this exact reason. So what happened there is I just forgot to change one of the values. Let's try that again. Right, cool. So it all works, and that is my quick basic guide when it comes to unit testing. Actually, just one more thing. I can put this. Actually, no need. Right. That's my quick and basic guide when it comes to unit tests. There is a lot more to unit testing, and if you guys want to see more videos like this, please tell me. This is a crucial part of the job market today, is the ability to test your code. All right, it will put you levels above other developers. Okay, please unit test your code. All right, there are more difficult things when it comes to unit testing, but in all honesty, I think if you just get started with this, you will become better and better, and we can get to a level where that when you get a take-home project, you absolutely smash the unit tests. Thank you very much for listening to my video presentation. Have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Please like and subscribe.